Step into the Valley of the Kings today and you'll notice that the most important tools aren't T-chisels and pigments. They were sensors, lasers, airflows, and rules. Conservators are racing a simple equation. Every breath and bead of sweat from visitors adds moisture, carbon dioxide, dust, and microbes to tombs that were sealed for millennia. In the dry Theban climate, that burst of humidity drives salts in the walls to dissolve and recrystallize. When the air dries again, those crystals expand and push painted plaster off the rock face. Modern conservation is about breaking that cycle without touching the paintings any more than necessary. First line of defense, tight environmental control. In high-value tombs, teams monitor temperature and relative humidity with data loggers, study airflow with smoke tests or CFD models, and install discrete ventilation where needed so warm, moist air from visitors doesn't pool over painted walls. Doors and antechambers act as airlocks, while visitor time inside is limited to prevent humidity spikes. Lighting is now low heat, low UV LED, enough to read the scenes, not enough to bake them or feed algal growth. Floors are raised and routed with glass rails to keep elbows, backpacks, and dust away from fragile pigment. Even the angle of a fan or the gap under a barrier is chosen so it doesn't throw grit onto a Falcon SI or a King S cartouche. Second, visitor management is treated as a conservation tool. Capacity caps, timed tickets, and rotation, closing one tomb while opening another, keep cumulative stress down. The most radical move is also the least invasive, high-resolution facsimiles. By scanning a tomb's surface at micrometer scale and reproducing the slightest bump and brushstroke, a replica can absorb mass tourism while the original rests. Tutankhamun's burial chamber became the poster child for this strategy. A full facsimile installed near the valley so most people can meet the art without the art meeting their breath. Third, documentation so precise you can measure a crack reopening to the millimeter. Laser scanning and dense photogrammetry build 3D baselines. Follow-up scans show what changed after a summer of heavy visitation or a freak storm. Multispectral imaging maps underdrawings, past restorations, and invisible damage. Infrared luminescence reveals trails of Egyptian blue the eye can't see, letting teams target stabilization where the paint layer is thinner or underbound. All this data feeds condition maps and maintenance schedules, so a conservator can say this patch moved rather than it looks worse. Fourth, stabilization with reversible, compatible materials and the lightest possible touch. When paint flakes lift, conservators slide in fine consolidants by capillary action or micro-syringe, just enough to read here a curl of pigment, not enough to stain or darken. For tiny fragments, a 3 to 5% acrylic copolymer is a standard choice because it's stable, optically clear, and can be redissolved later if a better method arrives. Where plaster detaches from the rock, micro-grouts, lime-based and breathable, are injected to rebond voids without sealing salts inside. Cleaning is usually dry and local, micro-vacuuming and soft tools to lift dust without abrading a painted grain of sand. Aqueous or gel systems are tested in tiny squares and abandoned if they shift color or sheen. Fifth, emergency triage for the valley's biggest enemies, water and salts. After rare storms, crews control runoff and splashback at doorways. Inside, poultices may pull soluble salts out of plaster before they erupt as efflorescence. If a fissure starts channeling moisture, it's mapped, sealed, or diverted, then logged in the monitoring plan so the same trouble spot gets watched every season. None of this works without people and policy. Conservation plans now treat the valley as an ecosystem. Custodians who enforce time and number rules, training for guards who know why a closed gate saves a painting, daily dusting routes, monthly checks of logger batteries, annual reports that compare this year's graphs to last year's and adjust thresholds. The result isn't a single fix, but a living maintenance loop. Monitor, interpret, act small, measure again. And modern practice is deliberately humble about uncertainty. Ventilation that keeps walls dry in winter might overdry them in July. A consolidant that behaved perfectly on one pigment can turn glossy on another. A timetable for groups that worked before a holiday surge may need rewriting mid-season. That's why the baseline data matters, why facsimiles exist, and why some tombs will always be closed or on rotation. The prize is time, slowing damage so the paintings outlast us. If you want more evidence-first breakdowns of the tech that keeps New Kingdom colors on the wall, from laser scans to salt maps, tell us which tomb you want decoded next, and we'll follow the instruments into the rock.